Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is July 6th, a Wednesday of 2022, and I'm speaking with you today about something interesting that you haven't noticed. The fear that has been cultivated. Just like seeds, fear has been planted for several months now, and it's been growing. And it has been growing for a reason, and we're seeing that cultivated now, and we're going to discuss that a little bit. But before we do, we want to mention to you that if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we welcome you, we thank you for being part of our audience. And we want you to know that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all social media that the internet overlords will allow, to be able to hear what you have to say in tweets, in chats, and phone calls about the issues that are affecting you. From anywhere in the world, we ask you to reach out and to tell us what you think, because we believe in the First Amendment. It's not just an American right, it is a birthright of everyone. And whether your government agrees, whether or not the internet overlords agree, we want to hear what you have to say about the issues that affect us all. So we hope to see you this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, with that said, today we're going to be talking about a little bit about fear and how that fear has been affecting you. You probably haven't noticed it. Most of us haven't noticed that the media and the politicians have been using fear to get people very worked up. And we're seeing that result here in the summer and going into the official major mainstream election season. So let me explain what I'm talking about, and I think you'll see what I mean. Now, over the last several months, and in particular in the last 2 months, we have seen a remarkable increase in the amount of news and politics focused on the Second Amendment. Going about 2 months ago, back in April, we started hearing about ghost guns, and we started seeing an emphasis on certain types of crimes with firearms, like the New York subway attack. Also hearing about people talking about red flag laws and how they have to be instituted to take away our rights and freedoms to protect us. These politicians magnanimously are going to go forward and take away our Second Amendment rights, strip us of our ability to be able to protect ourselves so that we can be safe. They're doing this for us. At least that's what they keep saying. And so we've seen over the last 2 months, over and over again, besides talking about Russia, and in particular that Putin is evil and that we need to have higher oil prices to help the Ukrainians, we have seen that there has been more and more discussion about firearms, about the Second Amendment, about gun bans, about red flag laws, about restrictions on our freedoms over and over again. And about a month ago, this really started hitting a peak because we knew that the Supreme Court decision on the New York case on whether or not concealed carry is a right that is part of our birthright as American citizens. And so we started seeing things from Steve Kerr. We started hearing more about the core questions of what is gun control, or what should be gun control, what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed to be owned by American citizens, and how you can protect yourself. In states like in New York State, in the last 2 months, we have found that body armor, passive self-defense, has become a crime. It is a criminal act to passively defend yourself. We have been told over and over again that we do not have the ability to own certain firearms, and that the restrictions, the requirements to be able to get licensed, the burden has been raised higher and higher, pricing out individuals who are poor and even middle class women, denying them the ability to take care of themselves. In Delaware, where we have seen gun bans that have been instituted that make no sense whatsoever, and we'll go over that in a moment. We've seen in California with rulings there. It's just been growing across the country. And we've seen Yes, the New York subway shooter, the Buffalo shooter, the Uvalde shooter, and now we have the 4th of July Chicago shooter as well. And there has been a certain emphasis that has been put on certain stories and not on others. The New York subway shooter, a black supremacist, that story disappeared almost overnight. It was gone within 3 days. You look at the Buffalo shooter, and that is still being referred to and being isolated and targeted, saying, well, that's why we have to control the First Amendment. We have to control from the government, from appointed Governor Kathy Hochul. We have to control the way people speak on social media because, well, the Buffalo shooter, which doesn't make sense. But that's the argument that's being made. As we are being told, this is more rampant, more active, this is more consistent than we have ever seen before, which is factually incorrect, empirically incorrect. And that we have to be afraid of people who have semi-automatic weapons, which are incorrectly labeled as assault weapons, which by absolute definition is not true. We're talking about semi-automatic rifles, which is roughly, in terms of mass shootings and school shootings, roughly about 3% of all mass shootings and all school shootings in any given year. Only about 3% of them are actually used with a semi-automatic rifle. That's not commonly what's used. In fact, homemade bombs are used more often, or about the same, depending on the year. So that kind of brings us to where we are now, where we have so much fear. Uvalde was about the fear. Well, it was afraid. People were afraid to go in and confront the shooter. The shooter did it because they were afraid of being different. This is fear. You have to be afraid of these firearms. The recent 2 weeks ago in Delaware, this is HB 450. And what this does is it is a gun ban in the state of Delaware. And this gun ban in particular removes certain types of semi-automatic rifles, which they interchangeably call assault weapons, which is incorrect. We'll explain that. But one of the things that are highlighted there, and we want to point that out for you, is nothing other than the Ruger Mini 14. This is the Ruger Mini 14. And this folding stock version, that was banned in the state of Delaware. This one, the version with the solid wood stock, that's legal. They're the same gun. They do the same thing. They fire the same rounds. They use the same types of magazines. They fire at the same exact rate. But there's only one of them that's illegal. And again, going back to the state of Delaware, as you can see, it is the Ruger Mini 14 folding stock model. There's no difference. It's the same firearm. It has the same capability. Again, I will show you the image. There is no difference here. The only difference is what the politicians want you to feel about it. They want you to be afraid of this version, which is more likely to be seen in a Hollywood movie, than this version, which would not. That's all. That's the only difference. And that's kind of sad because, again, this is about fear. This is about cultivating the amount of fear that you have. And that has come together in a very interesting way. And I think we have an interesting presentation of it. On July 4th, we had a demonic mass shooter who, like every year in Chicago, every July 4th, there was a mass shooting. And that is true for decades in Chicago. God, every weekend is a mass shooting in Chicago. And you can take that from the mayor of Highland Park, as we were discussing with her yesterday, or rather reviewing in her comments yesterday. And yesterday, at the same time, this Yougov poll came out. And I think it's important to discuss this. Now, this Yougov poll was released on July 5th. We took the poll today, July 6th, a little earlier this morning. Yesterday, July 5th, July 4th. 6 people were shot and killed while attending a 4th of July parade in Illinois. just outside 23 miles away from Chicago, or in other words, in Chicago. In the United States, there has been one mass shooting every week in 2022. They don't provide any sourcing for that. That is not true. But we do have to say, throughout the nation, there are many different ways of counting what is or is not a mass shooting. And so there are very different numbers and totals that you can see in either the news media or from the government. So I don't know which source they're using. It doesn't seem correct, but we'll take their word for it. Today, we'd like to hear your thoughts on America and guns. This is a poll to find out whether or not Americans trust other Americans with firearms. This is an important question because this goes to the heart of the gun control regulations we have been hearing that have been pushed by Joe Biden, the Biden-Harris administration, appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, and many other of the Democratic leaders across this nation. They're telling you they have to change the Second Amendment, that they have to deny you your rights and freedoms, that they have to put burdens in front of you as if it were Jim Crow and you, and this were the 1950s, that they have to raise the burden to limit the number of people who have these firearms for your safety. And yet they do not provide any evidence that that is in fact the case. Let me point out something before I get to the poll. As an example, New York State, because the Supreme Court came out and said that every American citizen has a right to be able to be armed, that they have a right to conceal carry. That was the decision in New York versus Bruin, B-R-U-E-N, or New York State. And the Supreme Court said, you have this right intrinsically. Previously, New York State said the burden was on you, the individual. You had to prove why you deserve to exercise your rights. The Supreme Court said, no, it's the reverse. New York State has to, the burden is on New York State to say why you can't exercise your rights if you want to. Now, in that discussion, in that July 1st decision by New York State to suddenly come up with a new set of rules, a new set of regulations, adding new burdens in terms of monetary cost, in terms of time cost, in terms of paperwork burdens, New York State has tried to stop people from being able to exercise their rights, as the Supreme Court has said you have the right to do. In fact, they even added an invasion of your privacy and a restriction on your First Amendment by requiring that you have to provide your personal information, anything and everything you have said on social media for 3 years as part of the process to be approved to be able to have a license, especially concealed carry. So one of the reasons why that was done, as highlighted by CBS, as we showed in a previous video, the fact is they asked appointed Governor Hochul, well, why are you doing this? Is there any evidence that people with concealed carry permits commit more crimes and more gun crimes than any other group of individuals? Can you show any evidence that people with concealed carry permits are increasing in the amount of crime that they are committing, whether or not with a firearm? And so we decided that since appointed Governor Kathy Hochul said she doesn't need to give any evidence, we decided to find out, is there any evidence? And we have submitted a FOIA request with the Division of Criminal Justice Services in New York State to get the New York State to provide us with the actual numbers going from 2013, when they passed the New York SAFE Act, to today. We await this response from New York State on these numbers, which we expect to be, if not zero, pretty close. With that said, let's go back and take a look. What has been the result of politician after politician telling us we don't have this right, that we can't be trusted? American citizens can't be trusted at 18. You are a legal adult in the United States at 18. At 18, you can vote in elections and change this country and the direction of this country at the local, state, and federal level. At 18, you can sign contracts and loans for tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. Look at college debt happening all the time. And you can also go into the military and fight for our nation and the values of our nation and give your life at 18. But somehow, those decisions aren't important enough, do not convey the same kind of responsibility to own a firearm. That is the message that we have heard from Democrats in state after state, that they have rammed this through in case of New York in literally less than 24 hours without anyone ever reading the document. It was written and approved and voted and signed into law, and no one got to see it. So in the first paragraph we see there, they are eliciting several things. And I want you to understand this because the nature of a poll informs the way that people answer the poll. The questions in the framing of your mind is very important. And we believe this is being used to allow Democrats to go out in the 2022 election season to put out ads to say, see, this is in your best interest. Americans agree with us. That's what we believe they're doing. But let's go and see. So they say, okay, 6 people were shot and killed. They're looking for sympathy. They're looking to put your mind in a state where you are upset. It is an upsetting thing. So they go on to say, there's been 1 mass shooting per week. Again, tapping into the fear that has been generated over the last 2 months of news stories focusing on you are in danger, you're going to be harmed, the government is going to save you. Okay, so that's the frame of mind that the Yougov poll wants you to be in. And their first question is, how safe or unsafe do you generally feel at public events? Well, they just told you you're not safe at a public event. They specifically pointed out 2 days ago and a day before this poll was first released that you aren't safe. They've changed your mindset. Okay, when we took it this morning, 29% of people feel very safe. I feel very safe. It is highly unlikely that American citizens will be involved in a mass shooting. That is just a fact. They are uncommon. On average, for the last 45 years, there is about 20 mass shootings per year, with about 100 people being shot in those events. So you're pretty safe. Now, if I lived in Chicago, I might have a different feeling. Again, depending on where you live, you may answer this very differently. If you live in Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, New York City, LA, St. Louis, depending on where you live, Portland, you may feel very differently than people who live in other parts of the nation. But 29% said, no, they feel perfectly fine. They feel safe. 40% feel somewhat safe. So 69% of Americans, an overwhelming majority, feel safe at going out to events. And it's only 8% of Americans that feel very unsafe. That's a big, important thing. Most people have no worries. They will go to events. They will live their life. 8% have bought into the media message that you're in danger constantly, which isn't true. They go on in the poll. Thinking about gun ownership and guns in public, would people be more safe, just as safe as they are now, or less safe if more people carried guns with them? That's a badly worded question, but let's go with it. And we say, you'll be just as safe. Doesn't matter how many people have who own guns. We're talking about people owning guns. Okay. And they're carrying those guns. How do you know they're carrying them now? You don't. You don't have any idea about how many people are actually owning and carrying a firearm around you right this moment. That's the whole point of concealed carry. So why would it change your life? How would you know anything would be different? You wouldn't be, realistically. And so our answer is we'd be just as safe as we are today as we would be in that situation. Because We wouldn't know. It's concealed carry. You wouldn't know whether someone was or was not carrying a weapon. Now, if I was a criminal, perhaps I'd feel a little less safe. But then again, criminals prey on average law-abiding citizens. So they would be a little less safe because they would be confronted by armed individuals more often who would be able to resist those criminals more often. It makes crime harder. So they would feel unsafe, but everyone else, you wouldn't know a difference. 43% of people said they would feel more safe. Okay, but I find it interesting that 47% said they would feel less safe. Literally, if you're one of those 47% of people, almost half the nation that say, well, I would be less safe if more people carry a firearm. How do you know if someone's carrying a firearm right now? You're sitting in a bus, you're in a subway car, you're in a taxi, you're in a restaurant, you're wherever, you're at your job. How do you know someone sitting right next to you doesn't have a firearm? The only people who should feel less safe are criminals, quite honestly. But again, that is the mindset that has been created in this poll from the beginning, saying you're not safe. So would you feel safer if everyone owned a gun or not? I say if everyone owned a gun. Why not? Again, nothing changes and nothing should change in anyone's life if you own a firearm or not. The only people's lives that change are criminals and the deranged, like the mass shooters that we've spoken about. If everyone owned a gun or if no one owned a gun, they felt about the same. Although, if no one owned a gun in the United States, you'd probably be less safe because criminals who don't care about the law, they wouldn't be disarmed. They would still be armed. It's illegal for what they do now. And they don't care about the 22,000 gun laws in the United States over the last 50 years. Would you feel more comfortable traveling to a state with strict gun laws or a state with more open gun laws? Well, this is kind of interesting because I already live in a state. I live in New York State. It's one of the strictest states in the nation. New York, California, Illinois, Maryland. These are Delaware, some of the most strict regulations in the nation. Now, mind you, that doesn't change the fact that crime has been rising, that crime has been at elevated levels. It doesn't change the fact that Rochester is one of the most dangerous cities in the nation. Whether or not the state has a strict gun law or not doesn't mean that you are safe from crime, nor are you safe from gun crime. That isn't a one-to-one. So I've mentioned that, do I feel comfortable traveling to a state with strict gun laws or an open gun law stance? I would actually feel more safe in a state with open gun laws. Why? Because I could defend myself. Because I know others could defend me as well. If a shooter came out, if there was a bank robber, if there was someone robbing a convenience store, whether or not I might be armed, someone else there might be armed. In the case of what we saw with the Buffalo shooting, there might be someone else able to stop that criminal sooner, or at least to confront that criminal sooner, which we have seen historically means that they stop killing people at that moment. It is normally, in most mass shootings, once that shooter is confronted, the number of people who die stops or is significantly decreased, depending on the case. But this is something that people were pretty evenly matched in. Fair enough. Do you think that the average American can be trusted with a firearm? This is the point of the poll. This is the point of the gun laws. This is what we have been seeing the news media trying to get to for 2 months. Are you afraid? Has the media messaging been effective? Whether it's social media, news media, or politicians, have they been effective in making you feel fear? Did they get their job done? Do you think the average American can be trusted with a firearm? 57% said yes. 38% said no. Time for a little bit of news. I want to interject something here. 99.994% of all gun owners. There are 165 million gun owners in America. Roughly 1 in 2 people own a firearm. Every other person you see on the street owns a firearm in America on average. These are facts. 99.994% of those individuals have never committed a crime, so you are completely safe. The average American, the overwhelming number of Americans are safe. And by the way, at this moment, this is from the ATF. As of May 2021, the most recent data from the ATF on the National Firearms Act registered weapons by state. In the United States right now, at least 741,000 machine guns are owned by American citizens right now. At this moment, 3.3 million rockets, mines, and bombs are owned by American citizens right this second. 1% of the nation of the United States owns hand grenades, rocket launchers, mines, and other bombs. And the news media likes to make you feel like, well, no one could own that. You hear Joe Biden say, you don't have a right to own a cannon. You've never had the right to own a cannon, which is factually incorrect. And it has been proven by the major news media, fact-checking him, that is a lie. It has always been a lie. And you can own a machine gun. And people do, in fact, own machine guns, not just in the beginning of the nation back in the 1700s, but right now, in 2022. So when they say, oh, do you think the American citizen can be trusted with a firearm? Yes, because they're trusted with machine guns and tanks. So yes, they can be trusted with a firearm. Absolutely. 57% of Americans say, yeah, of course they can. Moving on. Next question. How comfortable would you feel seeing a civilian carrying a handgun in a holster? Notice they are highlighting here handgun. They're making it bold. It's a civilian carrying a handgun in a holster. Doesn't that scare you? Handgun, scary. The answer is 44% of people. Overwhelmingly, the majority of people answering the poll, 44% said they'd be very comfortable. A criminal would be concerned. A gangbanger might be concerned. But why would you be concerned? And that's why 44% said, oh, no, they'd be comfortable. How comfortable would you feel seeing a civilian carrying a hunting rifle in public? I want you to understand. Again, hunting rifle. It's a hunting rifle. They've increased it. They've upped the ante. It's a hunting rifle. That's more dangerous. No, not necessarily. That doesn't, just because it's a bigger weapon doesn't make it a more dangerous weapon, quite honestly. But they say a hunting rifle, as if there is a difference. A rifle is a rifle. I can use any rifle to go hunting with. Some are better at it because of the gauge. Maybe some have ammunition that is larger than others, but I can use any rifle to hunt with. So to say a hunting rifle is a bit of a misnomer. Still, so they said a hunting rifle. Would you be secure with that? And the answer is 31% of people would be very comfortable. Really? So we see a big drop here. We see a drop of 13%. Why? It is no more deadly than a handgun. And in fact, if you see someone, if you're in sight of a person, if they are close enough to you that you can easily see a holster that they have with a firearm, with a handgun, then that handgun is probably more deadly at that range than the hunting rifle is, to be quite honest. But yet people are comfortable with the handgun, but they're not comfortable with the rifle. Why? Why are you worried about that? I think I know what the answer is. Because you think, when you see this, you're thinking of a movie. You're thinking of Hollywood. You're thinking of a Schwarzenegger film. You're thinking of a Bruce Willis film. You're thinking of a Stallone film. You're thinking of some kind of military, some sci-fi movie. I'm sorry, it's not aliens. The reality is you're probably safer than if someone had a handgun. Let's move on. And I think this is really critical here. How comfortable would you feel seeing a civilian carrying a semi-automatic rifle in public? And notice they keep saying civilian. You know what? I'm a civilian. I also am a Marine. That's right. I may be 54 now, but when I was younger, I was in the Marines, like many people. And you don't know how long I've been a civilian. How long have I been out of the military? How does that affect whether or not I have a firearm and how you feel about whether or not I have this firearm? You don't know if I'm an expert marksman or not. But going on, how comfortable would you feel seeing a civilian carrying a semi-automatic rifle in public? This is a trick. I want you to understand that. This is a trick question. This is a setup question. How comfortable would you feel seeing a civilian carrying a semi-automatic rifle in public? It's the same firearm as the hunting rifle. There is no difference. That's saying that's just like what Delaware has said, that because of the folding stock, this is a dangerous weapon, and because of the solid wood stock, this is a safe weapon. They're the same weapon. They do the same thing. You could say that this is a hunting rifle and this is not. If you said either of these were semi-automatic rifles, they both are. If you said that they're hunting rifles, they both are. There is no difference. But yet, we have been trained to think that this one looks scary. It looks like something in a movie. It looks more military, whatever that's supposed to mean, and therefore it must be more dangerous. And Yougov is playing into that fear and that Hollywoodization. I know it's not a word, I'm making it up right now. Hollywoodization of your impression of firearms. And they achieved and this shows you that the media have achieved their goal. 26% said they would be comfortable. 31% said they were comfortable with rifles. And 44% said they were comfortable with handguns. Again, you're probably more in danger of the handgun than the rifle if you can see it. But we're talking about someone carrying a semi-automatic rifle, a hunting rifle, and because they said semi-automatic rifle instead of hunting rifle or just plain old rifle, people are terrified because for 2 months, actually since 1984, we have been sold this idea that because it looks like something that is in a movie, because it looks like something we think the military would carry, just because of the look, the cosmetics, then it must be more dangerous. And we have associated that term with semi-automatic rifle or assault weapon. And people are terrified. It is the same firearm. This is the Delaware effect. This is the gun ban effect. This is the 1984 California assault weapon effect. And by the way, if you're wondering why I mentioned that, it was in 1984 that a California legislator created the term assault weapon when they were talking about a rifle. Okay, so this is how effective they have been, especially in the last 2 months. People are afraid, and they're afraid of the wrong thing. By the way, the majority of mass shootings involve handguns, not rifles. Most of the gun crime in America, over 60%, is with handguns, not rifles. Most of the suicides are with handguns, not rifles. They ask, do you or anyone in your household own a gun? I advise people never answer this question. Doesn't matter if you do or you don't. It's not their need to know. And that is being tracked. Do not think that that answer is not being tracked. Never answer that kind of question. I don't care who in the news media asks you. I don't care what kind of poll you're getting. Don't answer that. They don't have a right to know that. Have you personally ever held a gun? Well, it's public knowledge that I've been in the military. I've talked about it more than a few times. I have video of me firing a firearm. Of course I have. That's not a big deal. And 88% of the people who have taken this poll say they have held a gun. Anyone who's held a gun should, I would hope, would know that a semi-automatic rifle and a hunting rifle are the same thing. Yet, based on this fact that 88% of the people taking this poll at that moment said that they had a difference between a hunting rifle and a semi-automatic rifle, makes me wonder what's going on, and it has to be fear. Has to be. People are terrified. The fear that we have been pumped full of for the last several months, especially in the last 2 months, it's working because people aren't thinking. Have you ever shot a gun before? Again, they don't need to know this, but I'm military. Of course I have. And 93% of the people taking this, which I find interesting, something's wrong with the poll. Let's see. Have you ever personally held a gun? 88% say yes. Have you ever shot a gun? 93% said yes. How do you, I don't understand this. How do you fire a firearm without holding the firearm? I don't understand that. There's a discrepancy here. It makes no sense. 5% of the people are lying, apparently, about whether or not they've ever had a gun because 93% said that they fired it and only 88 said they held it. Doesn't make any sense. Again, the little things in the poll tell you that it is suspect, that something doesn't make sense. Something is wrong here. But again, I'm going to continue because this poll is going to be used against you. It is a justification for the news media to keep on pumping out these stories, demonizing semi-automatic rifles, and reconfigure your thoughts about what a firearm is and how dangerous it might be. Was there a gun in your house growing up? No one needs to know that. Don't ever answer a question like that. No one needs to know. And were you taught about gun safety? Well, I was in the military. Of course I was. And I'm sad that only 77% of people who have held a gun and or who have fired a gun, only 77% have been taught about gun safety. That's a little concerning to me. How important, if at all, do you think it is for gun safety to be taught in schools? 61% say it is very important. 61%, because kids should be aware of that. And by the way, I just left them a message saying they never defined or cited their claim for the mass shootings. Will you ever do a poll on the success rate of any or all gun control over the last 50 years? Rather odd that no one ever does that. But you see, I went through that in some detail because I want to highlight it's that fear that we were talking about. It's that fear that really we're quite tired of. We were talking about it yesterday, July 5th, because it's the same thing about Chicago. No one talks about Chicago because no gun control ever works. It has never worked. Chicago is the example of that. They have all of the gun control. They have all of the regulations. They have all of the fear. And yet, gun violence is rampant in that city. Go back year by year by year. Go back as far as you want. Every year, we see the same kind of result. What happened on July 4th in 2022 is about average for what we see in Chicago every July 4th. So it's not a new thing. But because of that fear that has been instilled into you and the way that they have been pushing this fear for months to be able to justify trying to violate the Supreme Court and your Second Amendment rights, we get things like this from New York State, which was created in less than 24 hours. It was written, voted on, passed, and signed in less than 24 hours. They can't balance the budget. They can't lower taxes. They can't figure out how to do their spending. That all takes months upon months, if not years. But they can take away your rights in less than 24 hours. when they are motivated, when they have a purpose, and that purpose is to deny you freedom, to make you less safe, well, they can get off their asses and they can pass that in less than 24 hours. So apparently they can run our government better. They just won't. Gone through a couple of the sources. I've shown you what they're doing in Delaware. I'm showing you what they're doing in New York, what they're planning to do in California, what they're planning to do in Illinois, the things that they have done in Illinois. I've shown you real world, the exact examples of the idiocy of what they have done. And then I showed you the poll, and it is being effective. They are working. They are using the major mainstream media and social media to slowly and steadily warp your mind and the way that you consider firearms and firearm safety and what is an effective defense for you. And it's as obvious as saying, do you feel safe next to someone with a hunting rifle? Do you feel safe next to someone with a semi-automatic rifle? And you should say the same thing. Whether the answer is you're afraid or you're not, it should be exactly the same, because it is exactly the same scenario. And that tells you how much they have messed with people's minds. But maybe you think we have it wrong. Maybe you think that poll tells some other story, that it doesn't reflect a different impact in America, that there is something else that is happening. We'd love to hear what you have to say. All the links will be included in the description, and we hope that you look at it so that you can see everything in context for yourself. And we look forward to hearing your comments and, of course, joining us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the live stream where you get to tell us what you think is important in this nation. We thank you and you hope you have a good day.